Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, how are my snipers doing today? I hope you guys are doing fantastic. Listen, today we're going to be talking about the one and only Zebec. Listen, if you are new, make sure to subscribe because we will be covering this coin consistently, either every day or every other day, practically at least 4 to 5 times a week, guaranteed. Listen, last time we talked about, right, price action being in a very, very crucial spot. Okay, we talked about it. All right. The reason why it's in a crucial spot, ladies and gentlemen, is because we have this huge zone over here of 0.004. Let's just say, right? We have this huge zone over here. Last time we simply rejected off of it and we started to print lower high candles, right? We can see that, oh, boom, over here, we have a daily high, boom, right? This candle over here, we have a high, but then we printed a lower high, right? We can see the top of this blue candle on the Friday is lower clearly than the one on Wednesday. However, ladies and gentlemen, we also start to print higher lows, meaning that Zebec is being indecisive and, ladies and gentlemen, it is looking to explode sooner than later, okay? Because this is what happens. I mean, you could just even think about it, logically, right? When something consistently goes lower and lower and lower, but on the other side, it starts going higher, higher, and higher, you eventually come to a middle point, right? Where, you have to make a choice because how low and how high can you go at the same time? Literally, at one point, you eventually have to make a choice, okay? And that is just the reality, right? Because here you can kind of bounce off, right? Bounce off, but then eventually you have to choose. The markets have to choose. And now here's the deal, people, right? We talked about how there's going to be potential sells to the downside when we got this type of rejection. And there were, right? We went down a decent amount. We went down roughly 15%. However, in the last video, and you can go watch it back, we did say that this area right here is going to be a crucial area, okay? Even though technically at one point we did print a little bit lower on the 4-hour, right? We did actually form some type of support. Okay, we formed some type of support. Now, on the daily though, when we look at the higher time frame, it was a nice rejection, right? At the end of the day, it was just a nice rejection. And like I said, we are getting squished. So what is going to happen? Well, I'll break it down to you in just a second. Overall, we are bullish on this token. We are very high on this token, and we know this token is going to do well this cycle. The question just, not too long ago was, are we going to pull down and, consolidate around 0.0031 and go up, or are we going to have a little bit of a further pullback, potentially down to 0.0027, right? Those are our main things. We did also discuss in the last video, right? If we were looking to break from this zone, right? If we were looking to break from the zone, then of course we would be looking to have the most fundamental retest of all time of these highs over here, right? Is that highly likely? No, not necessarily, right? The two probabilities we are talking about are way more likely, especially with the one that's happening right now. The reason why that's also more likely, ladies and gentlemen, is because we are, really bullish with Bitcoin, right? We are really, really bullish with Bitcoin. We had a fantastic week for Bitcoin, right? We went from 107,000 at one point, 107,500, all the way to 119,000, almost 120,000, right? And then, of course, in the last day or so, we went from 119,000 to at one point to 123,000. Now, despite there being some type of sell-off, overall, I expect for us to be very, very bullish. In fact, I most likely do expect for Bitcoin to start to bounce up from this area and continue to rally up higher and higher. And if Bitcoin doesn't bounce from this area necessarily, where we have drawn up this rectangle, then it might go a little bit lower to 118,000 to then push higher. I am super, super bullish on Bitcoin. We are above a very big resistance, right? And guys, this is important to Zebec because, you want Bitcoin to continue its pump. Because right now it's not altcoin season anyways. Right now, we're not going to see those 200% gains in a week, right? Those are very, very unlikely. And those usually happen under a certain context. And of course, mainly during altcoin season, okay? But we can see we are above a huge resistance. But the thing is, ladies and gentlemen, once you go above the resistance, it actually turns into a support. So if we do hold the line, we will actually just continue to go up very, very aggressively until eventually we start to exhaust. And of course, eventually we will cycle out for a bigger correction before the whole cycle resets. Okay, that is just the reality. But let's go back to Zebec network just for a second, right? Let's go back just for a second. Boom, right? We can see, ladies and gentlemen, that if we go, right, we are selling off a little bit temporarily. And the reason why we are is because, boom, like I said, we did have an institutional candle over here, boom. And this is what I call the triple tap philosophy, okay? Where we actually have tap one, right? We have it tapping into this zone, right? Boom, this zone into this zone. And then, this wick into this wick. If you trade, right? If you trade, you know exactly what I'm talking about. This is one of the most profitable ways and best ways to trade is the triple tap philosophy, right? But we can see we did get a short-term sell-off, but we can see that we are not pushing lower and lower. Well, why is that? Because we are consistently creating higher and higher lows, ladies and gentlemen, which makes me believe that Zebec's correction phase is most likely over, right? It is most likely over, right? We had this zone over here. We had nice pump, boom. Now we have this zone over here. And then now we can see consistently that we are just kind of going up higher and higher, right? And remember, I did say this in the last video that we are going to see if we're going to hold this. And if we didn't, then we are going to look to see if we bounce off 0.0027. But overall, the longer term bias is very, very bullish. You know me, people, some of these people call this coin a scam. I personally know it's not a scam. People call every single coin nowadays a scam. Some people do it for their own benefit or narrative where they think where, they can call a coin a scam and that's going to make their coin pump, which that's not how it works, people, right? The reality is most people that invest in crypto are exit liquidity, okay? It is the big boys. It is the institution, it is the whales that are going to be moving us to the upside, right? Obviously, there's going to be some people that have lots of money and they also have, small minor effect. And when you include a lot of people that have hundreds of thousands of dollars in a coin, then of course there's some type of effect there too. But mainly people like us are simply exit liquidity for the whales. And that's just the reality. So you calling this coin a scam, you don't really do anything, right? Especially if your narrative and your objective is so you call every other coin a scam except yours, right? You're not going to do anything. I promise you, you will not impact these markets. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, right? I do believe Zebec will be holding, right? I do believe Zebec will be holding. And in that event, we should be seeing, a rally to the upside. For me, the next relevant big zone is going to be around 0.005253, which would be nice gains of roughly, 50% practically to the upside. We also do have an institutional candle here. So I do believe there will be some type of minor sell-off once we get to 0.0065. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, ultimately, we are looking good. We're actually looking kind of similar to what, price action was down here, right? Where, it's kind of indecisive. It kind of created a reverse head and shoulders and eventually exploded, right? Because right now we do have a reverse head and shoulder, right? Big shoulder here, head here, and shoulder here, right? This right shoulder is a little bit deformed, but that's okay. But that is okay. That is it, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you guys did enjoy, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Goodbye.